Let's begin with our class of general geology. So general geology, uh, as we speak, consists of it is a paper. It is a subject in paper one of UPSC Civil Services examination. And as I believe that you must be aware that the optional paper consists of two papers, paper one and two. So the first subject in paper one is general geology, right? Yeah. So let's have a syllabus discussion first. So general geology consists of three portions, uh, three parts. One is planetary geology, the second one is geodynamics, and the third one is geophysical phenomena. Now, planetary geology consists of five topics: the solar system, the meteoroids, the origin of the Earth, the interior of the Earth, and the age of the Earth. So these two topics coincide primarily with one more topic of paper 2, that is geochemistry. Yes, if you look at geochemistry syllabus, you will find certain more topics there, such as structure and composition of Earth, and you will find this topic meteoroids primarily there, where we have to deal with the composition of meteoroids as well as different lengths. Okay, then we will go on to origin of the Earth. So to understand the origin of the Earth, we need to understand the origin of the universe. We will start a lecture with that place, with that point. Further on, we will study about the interior of the Earth. That is the different layers that are present inside the Earth. What are their compositions, both in terms of physical characteristics as well as mineralogical and chemical characteristics. Fine. Then we will see, we will read about the age of the Earth. And here we are going to read about different techniques, different methods that are used to calculate the age of the Earth. Primarily, we will be reading about radioactive decay and how it is used in geochronology. Okay. Once we are done with this part, we will move on to geodynamics. Now, geodynamics in itself includes three theories. What are these three theories? The first theory is that of continental drift. Second one is that of seafloor spreading, and third one is of plate tectonics. These primarily tells us about what happens on the surface of the Earth and what are the phenomena, what are the landform consequential landforms that are formed because of these processes. We will also understand that these are the major processes, theories which explain the presence of volcanoes and occurrence of earthquakes. So yes, these will constitute a very important portion of geodynamics. Then we will read about the consequential landforms. The major landforms that are mentioned in our syllabus are island arcs and mid-oceanic ridges. But we will also look at some other landforms such as continent-continent collision, which results into the formation of fold mountains, such as the Himalayas. We will also look at this particular portion. Also, we will look at hotspots. Okay. We will also look at various characteristics of these landforms, which have been asked in our UPSC syllabus and papers multiple times. Okay. The next portion would be that of isostasy. Isostasy, as I believe that people must be aware that it is a theory which explains equilibrium that occurs in the lithosphere, and the equilibrium that takes place between the lithosphere, the crust, and the mantle, the upper mantle. So we will look at that particular theory. After that, in the part C, we will deal with geophysical phenomena of earthquake and a related topic of seismic zones of India. The other topic would be volcanoes, where we will deal with causes and products, volcanic belts. Also, related topics are volcanic hazards, which is part of environmental geology syllabus. We will see to those portions as well in the same section. So I hope that this was clear to everyone. Next, we are going to discuss the weightage of different oceans that we just talked about in previous 5-year questions that have been asked. I hope until now and everyone is clear about what we talked about. I hope nobody has no doubt. Right? If anyone wants to ask anything. you can ask it right now. Okay, okay. So I think everyone is clear up to here. So next is what we are going to talk about here is the weightage of different parts that we just talked about, the different portions of the syllabus in the UPSC examination in previous 5 years. That is from 2016 to 2020. Okay. So if you look at this pie diagram, or let's better look at the table, what we can see here is that the major portion that constitutes is of this portion, that is the continental drift, seafloor spreading, and plate tectonics. Out of 305 marks, 90 marks questions have been asked from this portion. And if we include the consequential landforms that we just talked about, this whole portion goes on to 125 marks, which is a major portion when we talk about from the total of 305 marks, right? The other topic is that of geophysical events, earthquakes and volcanoes, which if particularly in this section we talk about is of 90 marks. But if we include those topics that have been asked from other portion of the syllabus, such as engineering geology, where we will deal with the resistant structures of earthquake, and if we deal with, for example, if we talk about environmental geology, where we will deal with volcanic hazards and earthquake hazards, then this portion increases even more. So these two are the major portions, right? Then another portion that has been asked again is interior of the earth. So 40 marks portion has been asked from interior of the earth, and there is a very prominent question that is asked multiple times here, which asks us to give details of the different layers of the earth and the different discontinuities, which we will read in this lecture itself. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. So this was the analysis of the weightage of different portions that has been asked in the examination. Now, I also talked about meteoroids. What we'll see is that this 25 marks, it looks that it is not of much weightage here, but the same meteoroids are again asked in geochemistry, as I earlier told you. So if you include that here, this portion again takes a substantial amount. So to begin with, what we are going to do here is that firstly, we are going to see, we are going to revise the whole syllabus first, the major important topics, and then we will go look into the previous year questions from the same topics. I hope everyone is clear until here. There are no doubts. And if you want to ask anything, you can ask. Is it fine? So shall I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So to begin with, we will talk about the origin of the universe. But before that, we also need to consider that we might have some students who are not from geology background. So for them, especially for them, I want them to first look at a few basics, so that there are few terms that we use repeatedly in whenever we talk about geology. See, geology is something, a subject in which is very interconnected. So when I'm talking about general geology, you might hear terms about which we will read in detail in igneous petrology or metamorphic petrology, right? But we need to be aware about the terms. So if we are aware about the terms, we will be able to understand better. So as the terms come by during our lecture, I'll be explaining them in a little. But here, to begin with, let's start with some basic terms. So the first term that I want you to know is mineral. I hope that you must have watched the introduction to geology class by Amit sir. But if you have not until now, no problem. We'll deal with these basics right here. So the first term is minerals. So what are minerals? Minerals, for example, when we talk about chemistry and the building blocks of matter, we know something which is elements, and the elements when combined they form compounds, right? And compounds when combined form substances, right? So we can say that minerals are kind of one of those particular substances, right? Minerals. Now there are certain properties about minerals which are defined by International Mineralogical Association, and which help us identify which of these substances are minerals. Okay, so the first property is that the mineral must be naturally occurring, right? A mineral should not be something which is created by humans, anthropogenic activities. Okay, the first thing is that the mineral should be naturally occurring. Now the second thing is that the mineral must have a crystal structure. It must be crystalline, that is, it must not be amorphous. Okay, it must have a crystal structure. What is a crystal structure? It is the internal structure of any substance, but we will deal with crystal structure in details in a subject called crystallography, which is part of mineralogy. We will deal with it in detail. Okay, the third thing about a mineral, the third property about a mineral is chemical composition. So a mineral has a characteristic chemical composition. Initially, sometimes people say that it has a fixed chemical composition, but that is not particularly true because minerals do have some impurities. We will study a topic known as geochemical substitution. Students of geology must be aware with this topic. We will study this in geochemistry. What happens is that in minerals, they are formed of elements and compounds usually, but sometimes some elements are replaced, some atoms are replaced by atoms of different elements, and they form some impurities. So we in general say that minerals have a characteristic chemical composition. Okay, so these are the main properties which differentiate which identify, which characterize a mineral. And the last property is that it must be inorganic. The substance must be inorganic in nature. So this naturally occurring, this crystal structure, this characteristic chemical composition, and that they are of inorganic chemistry. They are built up of, they are inorganic in nature. These constitute minerals. And what are rocks then? Now, when minerals, different minerals combine together, they form an aggregate. This aggregate of minerals is called a rock or rocks. Okay, so the aggregate of minerals are called rocks. Now, these could be more than one mineral, and sometimes we find, rarely though, that even single mineral can form a rock, such as limestone. Okay, but we will deal with this particular thing later. One more thing, one more basic topic is that these rocks are of three types. We must be knowing: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. So what are igneous rocks? Igneous rocks are those which crystallize from magma that is generated inside the earth. What are sedimentary rocks? So when rocks are formed, they are eroded, they are disintegrated by the processes of weathering and erosion, and they finally get deposited again in the form of sediments, in the form of small particles, which later consolidate into sedimentary rocks, something we call sedimentary rocks. We have to deal this with sedimentary petrology separately. And then what is metamorphic rocks? Metamorphic rocks are igneous and sedimentary rocks which transform because of change in certain conditions, temperature, pressure, or insertion of certain fluids. These things transform these earlier formed igneous or sedimentary rocks into metamorphic rocks. So these are the three basic types of rocks. Okay, I hope this is clear, right? This was easy, this was clear, right? Anyone wants to ask anything?
No, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, then when we have talked about rocks, now we deal with certain more terms. These terms are known as felsic, mafic, and ultramafic. What does these terms imply is that felsic has something like a larger percentage of SiO2 in them. SiO2, that is silica and oxygen. Okay, so they have larger percentage of SiO2 in them. So such rocks or such magma is known as felsic. On the other hand, those which have a lesser percentage of SiO2 are known as mafic, and they are usually rich in elements of magnesium and iron. Okay, so these rocks are called mafic. And if the percentage of SiO2 is even lesser, less than 45%, then we call such rocks as ultramafic. Okay. So this is the basic term. Felsic, same thing, can be is sometimes also called acidic and basic. That is acidic when there is a larger percentage of SiO2, and basic when there is a lesser percentage of SiO2. Okay, what are these? What are their properties? The properties of these magmas we will deal in detail with igneous petrology. Okay. Now there is another term that we call intrusive rock and extrusive rock. Sometimes we also use the term volcanic and plutonic. Now, what do these imply? Volcanic or extrusive imply that these rocks have formed on the surface of the earth. These are particularly igneous rocks that we are talking about right now. Okay, these are particularly igneous rocks, and volcanic rocks are something which are formed on the surface of the earth. For example, when magma erupts out of a volcano and it starts to cool down on the surface of the earth, then the rocks that are formed are called volcanic rocks or extrusive rocks. And then there are plutonic rocks. Plutonic rocks are formed deep inside the surface of the earth. Okay, so these are some examples of plutonic and volcanic rocks. So if the composition of magma is felsic and the rock is volcanic, we call it rhyolite. And if it is felsic and the rock is plutonic, that is, it has crystallized at a great depth, then we call the rock granite. You must have heard of this term, granite. And similarly, there are other terms, such as in mafic, we deal with rock known as basalt and a rock named as gabbro. So basalt is a volcanic rock, while gabbro is a plutonic rock. Okay, don't worry if you're not able to grasp these terms right now. Just the thing is that you need to remember a little basics, and we will deal with details of each of these particular rock types because they are mentioned in our syllabus later on when we talk about igneous petrology. Okay. And while I talked about minerals, there are some minerals that we must be knowing. So when we talk about those minerals which are rich in SiO2, there are some minerals such as quartz and feldspar. These minerals usually occur in felsic rocks. Okay, and when they are and then some minerals that are rich in Mg, Fe, mafic minerals, what we call. So some of the names are olivine, pyroxene, and then there is garnet, which is not necessarily a mafic mineral, but yes, we can put it into that category for now. Okay, so I hope that this is clear. This particular thing is clear.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If anyone wants to ask anything right until now. Okay, fine. So this is the basics that we talked about right now, and now we dwell into our syllabus. Okay, so we will start with the first thing that we need to know about is the origin of Earth. But to know the origin of Earth, we must understand the origin of the universe. Okay, so what is universe? Universe is like everything that is present. For example, from the tiniest atom to the largest stars, galaxies, everything comes under the universe. What we call them aggregate cumulatively is universe. Okay, so how did this universe originate? That's what we are going to deal here. So there are different theories from ancient times. People have given different theories. There have been mythical theories in different religions. But as time proceeded and we got into the scientific domain, we came onto a modern theory, that is Big Bang theory. And that is the theory that we are going to deal here. That is the theory that is most important for us in terms of examination. Though this has never been asked in the examination until now, but there is a possibility that this might be asked. So we will talk a little about the Big Bang theory here. Okay. So the Big Bang theory. What would the name Big Bang suggests that it has something to do with a bang, an explosion, right? So that is what the Big Bang theory talks about. What happens is that the Big Bang theory assumes that at the beginning, what happened was that every matter, the whole matter that we see today, was concentrated in a single point, in a single, you can say, a tiny ball. Okay, it was infinitely small. It was very hot, and it was infinitely dense. You can imagine, because if all the matter that is present today was concentrated in that particular inner point, it would be infinitely dense, right? So this point, this particular point, this thing is called singularity. We call the term singularity. And then what happened, that about 13.7 billion years ago of giga annum, what happened was that there was an explosion. It was not like a conventional explosion, but yes, we can say that there was a very rapid exponential expansion. Something happened that caused exponential expansion, and then this ball exploded, and what we see now, the universe was generated from this particular tiny point of singularity. Okay, this is what the Big Bang theory hypothesis. Okay, I hope this is clear. So whenever one talks about, whenever there is a question on Big Bang theory, there are few terms that are needed to be mentioned, and you must mention these terms to make the examiner understand that you are a student of geology. See, one thing is very important when you are dealing with geology optional for UPSC. When an examiner checks your paper, he must not get the feeling that you are a student, you are not a student of geology, you are someone who has taken geology apart from, like just an optional. You cannot write the terms that we use in general studies here. We have to mention those specific terms, and when you mention those specific terms, they get the attention of the examiner. They get him to know that yes, you are a knowledgeable person, you are a geologist. Okay, that's what we need to make the examiner feel. And for that, as I talked about in the introductory video as well, that we need to mention some keywords. Okay, so those keywords in case of Big Bang theory would be, first would be what I told you, infinitely small, when we will describe singularity, and it would be that very hot and infinitely dense. These terms will be necessary when we describe singularity. And then when we describe the Big Bang, the explosion, the term instantaneous must be mentioned. The term exponential expansion must be mentioned. Okay, when you mention these terms, you will get good marks. I hope this is clear. The Big Bang theory is clear, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, but we need to see the evidence, because earlier also there were many theories, right? But they were not able to justify those theories. The people who propagated those theories were not able to justify them. So we need to see the evidences of Big Bang. What are the evidence? So Big Bang, the model is compatible with three astronomical observations, three key observations, which form the evidence, the proof of Big Bang. What are these? The first is expansion of universe. So what we see today is that the galaxies which are away from the Earth seem to recede away. They seem to recede away in every direction. For example, if this is Earth, then galaxy here is also moving away, here it is also moving away, galaxy here is also moving away, and here also moving in every direction. They are moving away from us. That means the universe is expanding. So this expansion of universe is one of the evidence of Big Bang, because initially what we talked about, that Big Bang started with an exponential expansion that is still going on. So this is actually true. Okay, and a scientist named Hubble gave a law for these recessional velocities of galaxies. What was the law? The law was V is equal to H into D. Now H is a Hubble constant, while D is the distance of galaxy from Earth. So for example, what this law says is that the galaxies which are far away are moving away from Earth at a faster rate, at even faster rate, okay, than those which are near to the Earth. So this is what the Hubble's law says, and this is what the expansion of universe. We actually see the expansion of universe. Okay, so that was the first proof. The second proof is cosmic background radiation. Now, what is cosmic background radiation? So we talked about that Big Bang was an explosion, right? So an explosion in which initially there was matter and then energy was created. It must have some remnant radiation. What is radiation? Radiation is the form of electromagnetic waves through which energy travels. So there must be some remnant radiation of such a huge event, which must be present even today. So that was first initially hypothesized, that there must be some radiation. We need to find it out. Until we find it out, we cannot just say that Big Bang happened. But then in 1965, the existence of this cosmic background radiation was confirmed. And for this particular confirmation, in 1978, a Nobel Prize was also awarded. So the predictions of some theoretical physicist was proven later by experimental physicists in the form of cosmic background radiation. Okay, so this radiation was found out that it was actually existing, and this was one of the proof that Big Bang happened. The last evidence about Big Bang is that the abundance of some light elements. So we will deal in again in geochemistry, we will deal with a topic known as cosmic abundance of elements. Okay, abundance means, which element is present in how much amount. That is what we call abundance. So the Big Bang theory predicts that, we will see later that the in nucleosynthesis topic, that Big Bang theory predicts that initially the elements which are formed were helium and hydrogen. Okay, and these constitute the major portion of the universe. The Big Bang theory predicts that, and actually experimentally it was also found out that in the observable universe, helium and hydrogen do form the most abundant elements. Okay, why I mention observable universe? Because of course universe is like, we have not yet reached all the ends of the universe yet, or we can actually not reach it, what is hypothesized by some physicists. But yes, in observable universe, helium and hydrogen do form the most abundant elements. So this was predicted by nucleosynthesis and later confirmed. Okay, so these are the three evidences of Big Bang theory. Okay, so I hope that this is clear. Does anyone want to ask anything? Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Very nice. Okay, so let me ask you a question. There's a force known as gravitation force, right? Gravitational force. So gravitational force is what that two masses attract each other, right? So two masses attract each other, and we know that like every matter, what is matter? Matter is something which has mass and which occupies some volume, right? That is matter. So every matter has mass. So if every matter has mass, like whatever matter we are seeing, the whole thing must be attracted towards each other, right? They must be attracted. But so how we are seeing an expansion if there is going to be an attraction amongst them? If there is an attraction, they must move closer to each other. But yet we are seeing an expansion. Can anyone tell me how is this is happening?
Sir, when the Big Bang happened, at that time, the elements, means the things which explode from singularity, they acquired some speed, velocity. So that is why they are expanding, because there is no resistance in the universe as we know for now. So they are not they are not coming to rest. That is why they are expanding.
Okay, okay. But then, yes, you are very close. But then, like, this gravitation, it provides an acceleration, right? Attraction, a force provides an acceleration, and if it is an attractive force, it must provide a deacceleration. For example, if this object is trying to move away with a velocity v, for example, this object is trying to move away because of the Big Bang, the velocity that the Big Bang provided it, this velocity v, but an attractive force is pulling it in the opposite direction, right? So this velocity must be decreasing, but what we find in evidence is that this velocity is actually increasing. That means that this force is not sufficient enough. There is some other force, there's some other force, there's some other object, there's some other energy which is actually causing an increase in this velocity, right? So that energy, what we call is dark energy. Okay, though this is not particularly a topic of geology, you will read this in general studies under science and technology. Okay, and if you have already read, do revise this. So this dark energy is something we do not know yet about the nature of dark energy. Like there are theories and there are research is still going on, but this dark energy is hypothesized that it provides that force which is actually causing an increase in this velocity, because matters, unless it wasn't there, matter must have got attracted towards each other, and we would not see an expansion, rather we would see a contraction. But if we are seeing an expansion, that means there's a presence of some mysterious energy, some mysterious force that is called as dark energy. Okay, so do read about this topic, dark energy, in your GS science and technology. So we have I think we are clear here. with the astronomical observations and the evidences of Big Bang theory and what Big Bang theory was. Let's move forward and come to what happened after the Big Bang. Okay, so after the Big Bang, the time period after the Big Bang is divided into two major stages, or what we can call as eras. One is a radiation era, and the other is matter era. Okay, so what is radiation era? Radiation era is something, the time period in which there was a dominance of radiation in the universe. Radiation, as we just talked about, is, it is in the form of electromagnetic waves, and it is the way in which energy travels. So initially there was a predominance of radiation, and it lasted for about 100 seconds. See, we have mentioned the time period here, 100 seconds. Okay, so in this era is divided into different epochs. We do not need to go into the details of the epochs, but what there is something that we need to understand, that what were the key events or what were the key results of this particular era. The key results were that first, initially there was a super force, which was a combination of all the standard forces. So what are these standard forces? Again, you will read in Science and Technology, the standard model of physics. That is a topic there. Do read it. But for our understanding, it is that initially these were all combined into a single force known as super force. But at the end, during this radiation era, this initially this force split up into four independent forces. That is gravity, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and electromagnetic force. This is our first consequence. Okay. The second major consequence of this particular era was the creation of the first element, that is helium. Okay, so initially what happened was that in this era there was some matter. It was not like that matter was not there. There was matter, but this matter was in the form of something called as quark gluon plasma. Okay, now what is quark and what are gluon? Again, I told you, Science and Technology, do read it. But for our understanding, what we can say are these are elementary particles, the particles which form other particles such as hadron, which are like basically protons, neutrons, and other particles, and then which ultimately form atoms. Okay, so quarks and gluon, what are these? These are elementary particles. Quark is something which forms matter, and gluon is a type of boson, and boson are basically force carrying particles. So we do not need to go into the details. It is like part of physics, but you will read basics in GS Science and Technology, because some experiments are being conducted at CERN and Large Hadron Collider, and even in India such research has started. So that's why we need to read a little about them in Science and Technology in GS. But matter existed, what for our understanding, matter at this time existed in the form of quark gluon plasma, and then these resulted into the formation of protons and neutrons. Okay, what are protons? Protons are positively charged particles, and neutrons are neutral particles. I hope everyone knows what are protons and neutrons, right? And ultimately, at the end of this era, what happened is that there was formation of the first element, that is helium. Okay, so these were the two major consequences, the two major results that we can derive from the radiation epoch, the radiation era. Okay, and this all happened in the first 100 seconds after the Big Bang happened. Fine. Next, we move on to the matter era. Now, what is the matter era? The matter era is that time period in which there was predominance of matter. So now we have seen that quarks and gluons resulted into the formation of protons and neutrons, electrons, and then into the formation of first element, that is helium. So next, what happened was that other elements were formed. So the second element that was formed was hydrogen. Okay, and then there was formation of galaxies. But the important thing was stellar epoch. The stellar epoch started about 3 billion years after the Big Bang. That is about something 10 point something billion years ago. So it started, and in this stellar epoch is going on even now. Okay, and this is the stage, this is the time period where stars are being formed. Okay, stars are being formed. And what happened at the end of this was that in the stars, we will see, there is a next topic, that is nucleosynthesis. We will see that there was creation of other elements that we see today. that happened in this particular epoch. Okay, so this is what happened after the Big Bang. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
See,
Yes.
we need
Yes,
not
sir.
go
Yes,
into
sir.
very, yeah, okay, fine. Thank you. See, we need not go into very much details of what these superforce are and what is the grand unification theory, and we don't need to go into that much details. That is part of physics, and in our case, we just need to have a basic understanding that if a question is asked on Big Bang theory, then we are able to at least mention these terms with a little bit of understanding, so that our answer will gain that particular edge over those of other candidates. Okay, so this is what happened after the Big Bang. Next, what we are going to deal with is a topic known as nucleosynthesis. Now, nucleosynthesis is the topic, it means creation of elements, and we are going to see how different elements are created. But one thing that we need to understand is that this is specifically a topic of geochemistry. This topic is not going to be asked to you, most probably it is not going to be asked to you in general geology section, but since it is a very related topic, we will study it here. Okay, and that's what we'll do through whole of the syllabus, that whenever we find some relevant topic, we will try to cover it then and there. Okay, so now we go into another topic, that is nucleosynthesis. That means creation of elements. So it is the process of creation of new atomic nuclei. Okay, with protons and neutrons. So this nucleosynthesis happened after the Big Bang in 4 phases. There were 4 major phases that were involved. The first phase was Big Bang nucleosynthesis, that happened immediately after the Big Bang. The second was stellar nucleosynthesis, when elements were created inside the stars. Third was explosive nucleosynthesis. This happened in a stage known as supernova. Supernova is a stage in stellar evolution. We will just see what it is. And in that particular stage, creation of certain elements happened. And the last stage was cosmic ray spallation, which is also known as galactic nucleosynthesis. In this stage, some lighter elements were formed. We will see in brief what each stage, what happened in each of these stages. Okay, so let's start with the Big Bang nucleosynthesis. So the Big Bang nucleosynthesis occurred when the Earth had cooled to a temperature about 10 to the power 13 Kelvin. So if we look at this table, so this happened around here in the radiation era itself, and this is the time when helium was actually formed. So what happened here was that matter coalesced together because of gravity. That is, gravity started attracting matter toward each other, so matter started coalescing. Okay, and initially it was formed in the form of quark, gluon, plasma, as we just talked about. But this coalition that happened, this resulted into formation of protons and neutrons. Once protons and neutrons were formed, then because of this reaction, can you see this reaction? Yeah. So what happened was that combination of proton and neutron resulted in the formation of deuterium, which was an intermediate product. What is deuterium? Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. So initially it was an intermediate product, and this deuterium later resulted into formation of a stable nuclei, that is helium. Okay, so as we see at the end of this process, we don't need to dwell into the chemical reactions, but what we can see is that the end of this process, the element that was formed was helium. And ultimately, after that, helium stabilized, this intermediate product stabilized in the form of hydrogen as well. So thus, you remember that we talked about that one of the evidence of Big Bang theory was that the abundance of light elements of hydrogen and helium. So see, Big Bang theory hypothesized this Big Bang nucleosynthesis, and we see actually that hydrogen and helium were formed. Okay, so in this stage, this was the major consequence, that hydrogen and helium were formed, but no heavier elements were not formed. So why these heavier elements were not formed in this stage? Because matter was coalescing. So because of this accretion of, we can say, or this coalesced matter, other elements could have been formed. But why were they not formed? Because of the very short duration of this nucleosynthesis. We talked about this happened in like less than 100 seconds or something. So this was too short a duration for the temperature to cool down to a limit that other elements could be formed. Okay, so heavier elements could not be formed, and hydrogen and helium were formed. Now, a question arises in my mind, that why was helium formed first? Why not hydrogen? Or why not deuterium? Why couldn't it get stabilized? Why was helium formed first? Can anyone, would anyone like to try? See, there is no harm in trying.
Noble gas.
Yes. Can you repeat?
Sir, helium is a noble gas.
Yes, very correct, very correct. See, if we see the periodic table, helium comes on the top of the noble gases. Okay, but what happened actually is that it is a portion of chemistry. But if we see the atomic structure, it is something like this: that there is a nucleus here, right, which has neutrons and protons, and then electrons are revolving around in orbits. So there's something called filled orbits. Okay. Now, what is filled orbits? That each orbit can hold in itself a certain number of electrons, after which it attains a stable configuration, a configuration which is stable, and that makes the gases unreactive. So helium has that stable configuration, that it has 2 electrons in its first orbit, and that makes it a stable nuclei, right? We write helium as 4He2, so that makes it a stable nuclei, and that is why helium was the first gas that was formed. I hope this is clear. So yeah, so that was the Big Bang nucleosynthesis, the first phase. The second phase in the same thing was stellar nucleosynthesis. Now, what is stellar nucleosynthesis? Stellar, as we just talked about, it deals with, it implies the evolution of stars. So this type of nucleosynthesis, the creation of these types of elements, happened during evolution of stars. So what is the stellar evolution? We will just see when we will talk about this explosive nucleosynthesis. But for the timing, what we can understand is that stellar evolution is the evolution of stars. So subsequent nucleosynthesis occurred in the core regions of a star, right? So predating our solar system, still there were stars that were being formed, and in the core of those stars there were nuclear fusion and fission that was going on, because different matter was coalescing. So when two particular particles, they come and collide with each other, what happens is the process of nuclear fusion. And if another comes, a particle such as a neutron comes and strikes an unstable isotope or unstable atoms, a process known as nuclear fission happens, right? So that happened in the core region of the stars, and with this process, certain number of steps, this process happened in some steps. So what were these steps? These steps were that successive nuclear fusion processes occurred. So first thing was known as hydrogen burning, in which hydrogen atoms collided and they resulted in the formation of helium. The second one was that now this product, its burning took place, and then the product were carbon and oxygen. There were some other products, but these were the major products. And subsequently, carbon burning occurred, neon burning occurred, oxygen burning occurred, and silicon burning occurred. We don't need to remember all the products that took place, that were formed, but we need to remember, what we need to remember is that these burning processes, these subsequent processes that occurred. Okay, so the last process was silicon burning. And in silicon burning, what happened was the formation of nickel. But nickel, the isotope of nickel that was formed was unstable, and it ultimately led to the formation of iron, Fe5626. Yes, this iron isotope, which was stable. And so this is the process, this is the point where the stellar nucleosynthesis stopped at iron, because it was stable, it was very stable nuclei. And that is why we see that the core regions of most of these stars still have iron in them, right? So this was the end product. Okay, at this point, a stage known as nuclear statistical equilibrium was reached. Now, what is this complicated term, nuclear statistical equilibrium? It is nothing, but for our understanding, what is happening here is that this iron that is formed, now the heavier elements are being formed, but they are, instantly being broken down into, disintegrated into the previous elements that were formed earlier. Okay, so this is what this statistical equilibrium, we can say that these processes are happening simultaneously, and so no stable heavier nuclei was being able to form at this stage, and this stage stopped at the creation of iron. So iron was formed in the cores. Okay, core regions of stars. Is this clear? Any doubts?
Yes, sir.
I hope this is okay. Everyone understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Nice. Okay, fine. So let's move on. So this was the second phase. This was the second phase. Then comes the third phase. The third phase, as we talked about, was explosive nucleosynthesis. This explosive nucleosynthesis occurred at a stage in stellar evolution known as supernova. Now, what is supernova? Let's just talk a little about stellar evolution. Okay. So what happens is that initially there are something called main sequence stars. Okay. In stellar evolution, after from the nebula, these main sequence stars are formed. So these main sequence stars are actually of two types on the basis of their mass. Okay. The more massive stars go through some different processes, and those with lesser mass, what we call low and medium mass stars, like our sun, go through some different processes. So what happens in higher mass stars? The higher mass stars, when they run out of all the fuel, they run out of all these burning processes, and this iron is formed at the core of them, they reach a stage known as red supergiant, where they turn red. We call this particular type of thing a red supergiant. Okay, and that iron has formed in the core, and the star runs out of its hydrogen and other fuels that were happening earlier. Okay, so what the stage that is reached is known as red supergiant. Now what happens is after this is that, since we just talked about that these are very massive, so when they are very massive, the gravitational force that is pulling all the matter at the edge towards its core, this force is very high, right? Now there is some other force that is opposing them as well. So when this matter is being pulled towards the core by gravitational pull, there is a force known as electron degeneracy pressure. Okay, it is, don't worry about the complicated term. It is just something that was hypothesized, and that was actually proven later by Pauli's exclusion principle. We can just for our understanding, what we can understand is that it was a force which was repelling this gravitational pull. Okay, and so there was a balance between them, and when the balance between them, there was a balance between them until here. But then when the balance between them was broken, what happened was that this matter collapsed. The matter in the supergiant collapsed, and when this collapsed, it resulted in the formation of a stage known as supernova, and an explosion took place. Okay, what happens after supernova? So after supernova, if the stars are very massive, they turn into black holes. We are all fascinated by black holes, and this is how they are formed. And if they are like a little of lesser mass, they turn into something known as neutron stars. Now we don't need to go into what these things are. What, for our understanding, what we need to know is about what is supernova, a basic understanding. Now what happened at supernova, that is of more importance here. So what happened at supernova, that compression took place as we just talked about. This compression, what would this result in? This gravitational pull, the particles will come and collide together. When they will collide together, they will generate heat, and when they generate heat, the temperature rises, right? So the temperature rises, and when this temperature rises, it results into breakdown of existing nuclei. So those nuclei which were already existing in this red supergiant, they start to break down. So we talked about here, what were these nuclei? These were the nuclei, the products. These were those nuclei, and these were now generated in supernova. So I'm sorry, these were now broke down. These broke down in supernova. And why this happened? This happened because, because of this collision, a large number of neutrons and protons were generated. A large number of neutrons and protons were generated, and then these existing nuclei, what they took was some of them captured a proton, some of them captured a neutron, and ultimately resulted into formation of isotopes of higher atomic number, such as gold, such as silver. So these elements and other such elements, these formed at this stage. Okay, is it clear? I hope this supernova stage is clear. This explosive nucleosynthesis is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Okay, nice. Okay. So there's just since I have also been a student of general studies, so there's just one more topic, a side topic that I would want you people to read about. That is Chandrasekhar limit. Okay, there's a topic in GS known as the contribution of Indian scientists. Okay, it is a topic in paper 3. Okay, and in previous years and last few years, UPSC has a knack of asking questions from innovations and findings of different scientists. So recently there was a question on this Bose-Einstein condensate, and then there are various questions on this particular topic which have UPSC has started asking in recent years. So this Chandrasekhar limit is something which is related to this topic. There was an Indian scientist, and he found something related to astronomy. So what is this Chandrasekhar limit? You please read it out. Okay, it is something to do with stellar evolution and black holes. So I hope it will be interesting for you as well. So do read out. Okay, so here we are done with our third phase, that is supernova, and then comes the fourth phase. The fourth phase is cosmic ray spallation. So what happens? What is cosmic rays? Cosmic rays are nothing but high energy particles. So it has been proven lately, not lately, I mean it has been some years, that it has been proven that energy or light and any electromagnetic radiation, what we can say, it shows two particular characteristics. It sometimes it sometimes shows characteristic of a wave, and sometimes it shows a particle nature. And in terms of light, we call them photons, right? So what we can consider cosmic rays is that they are made up of these high energy particles such as alpha particles. Okay, so when these alpha particles, they collide with certain nuclei that were earlier formed in stellar stage, such as carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. So when they collide, they result into the formation of lighter elements. These lighter elements had not been formed until now. I mean, they had been formed, but in very little amount. So in this stage, majorly these lighter elements are formed: lithium, beryllium, and boron. Okay, so this concludes our topic of nucleosynthesis. So if anyone wants to ask anything until now, I hope this is clear, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine, thank you. So this concludes our topic of nucleosynthesis. Okay, next we just talked about what we talked about. We talked about Big Bang. Then we talked about creation of elements, right? Now we are going to talk about something called our origin of our solar system. So we talked about the generation of stars, the generation of galaxies. Now particularly we will deal with origin of our own solar system. Okay, so there are again various theories that have been given for the origin of our solar system, but one model stands out. Again, it is one of the most accepted models, and this is the model that is of importance with the perspective of our examination. That is the planetesimal model. So what happens in this planetesimal model? This has been explained properly in Amit sir's class. Okay, Amit sir has explained this beautifully, but now we will just revise this topic again for the sake of people who are joining new. What happens in planetesimal model is that we know that Big Bang took place about 13.7, 13.8 billion years ago. Now, about 5 billion years ago, there was formation of nebula. Now, what is nebula? This nebula is a molecular cloud, a cloud of molecular dust and the earlier formed elements such as hydrogen and helium. Okay, and that plasma that we talked about, it is a form of a cloud which has all these constituents. How was this nebula formed? This nebula was formed from it is hypothesized that previously, there were many stars had been formed from 13.8 billion years ago till 5 billion years ago. Many stars had been formed, and those stars had actually reached their end of their cycle as well, as we talked about here. They had gone into all these stages, and these stages they resulted in the formation of something called nebula. So for our understanding, what is nebula? Nebula is a molecular cloud. This molecular cloud was actually rotating. So as we is seen here in this diagram, it was actually rotating counterclockwise. Okay, and it has all these particles. Now If it was rotating, what happened was that during the rotation, it most of its mass got concentrated at it near its center, and some of the mass was scattered outside. Now this mass that was scattered outside started rotating even at a faster speed. Why it started rotating at a faster speed? Because something known as angular momentum. Okay, what is angular momentum? It is nothing. It is actually something called moment of inertia into omega, that is the rotational velocity. But for our understanding, what we need to understand is that this particular quantity is conserved in a closed system. If no external force is being applied, if no external torque is being applied, this angular momentum is conserved in a process. So since in this nebula, this rotating nebula, it was in the form of a flattened disk, you can imagine. So if this was rotating and most of the mass got conserved near the center, then the mass that was away started rotating even at a faster speed. Okay, so this mass that got concentrated at the center, this was the proto-sun. We can say the father of our sun. Okay, so this was what later changed into our own sun. And these particles that remained outside, these resulted in the formation of all the other bodies that we see, that is the planets, asteroids, even some meteoroids. Okay, so these were the particles that resulted in formation of other things. So a byproduct of the earlier process was planets. Now the formation of planets took actually place in through two processes or through two stages. Now, what were these two stages? We just talked about that initially this molecular cloud was made up of gaseous particles, right? So first thing was condensation. Condensation means these gaseous particles got converted into solid particles, into grains, we can say. Okay, so that was the first process, condensation of hot gases into grains. And second process was when these grains had formed, they accreted. I mean, accretion, by accretion means they got collected, and they collected and resulted into formation of bodies, celestial bodies. So okay, the second process was accretion. Okay, and these celestial bodies that were initially formed, these were called planetsimals. Yes, that is why the name of the model, planetesimal model. So these were formed. These formed planetsimals. These were these were about what, a 1 kilometer in diameter, not very large. Okay, and such planetsimals were formed. And then what happened is that when these planetsimals were formed, many planetsimals were formed. Okay, if there's the sun. So what happened after this, that the gaseous cloud was still there around them. This gaseous matter, this matter was still there. So what happened was that local feeding zones were formed. That is, they started attracting matter because of their gravitational force, the matter that was present in their vicinity. And that is why the planets that were formed are of differing compositions. They are not of same composition. And that is one of the reasons that they are of different compositions. Okay, because they something called local feeder zones. Each of the planets actually formed local feeder zones, and then these local feeder zones, they started feeding on the interstellar dust and the grains and the molecules that were present in their vicinity, and then they formed something called planets. Okay, so that is how planets were formed. Fine. Now planets have been formed, but then what happens is a phenomenon known as solar wind. What is solar wind? Solar wind is that sun, the structure of the sun, which we'll study briefly in geochemistry, has different layers. So there is a layer known as the photosphere, the outer layer. For example, we can say that there is an outer layer of the sun, and this layer releases some charged particles. Okay, this layer releases some charged particles. These charged particles move with very high velocities. to the order of like supersonic velocities. Okay, and what happens is that now the planets are in the formation, their formation stage. Now those planets which are near, their interstellar dust, which is volatile in nature, will get blown away because of these charged particles, right? So something called what will remain if these volatile particles, volatile means you can say gaseous particles, these volatile particles are blown away because of this solar wind, this charged particles. What will remain? What will remain is refractory material. What is refractory material? Refractory material which has very high melting point, so which crystallized early actually. So that will remain. So the planets that were near, from them this volatile matter got blown away, and the planets that were away, it got concentrated in them. So that is how we differentiated between terrestrial planets or the inner planets and the outer planets, also known as Jovian planets. Okay, this is how it happened. So we are at this stage that the inner planets have refractory material in their cores. Refractory material includes elements such as magnesium, calcium, iron, silicon, and the outer planets have gases, more concentration of gases such as hydrogen, helium, and other noble gases. But their cores are still metallic. Why are their cores metallic? Because as we talked about, this accretion did take place. This stage did take place in every planet. So their cores are still metallic, but the outer layers are made up of gases. And in case of inner planets, they don't have that volatile matter. They have lesser amount of volatile matters, and they are made up of refractory material. That is why they are called terrestrial planets, and that is why these are called Jovian planets or gassy planets. Okay. Also, with leftover, what was left over after the formation of planets got converted into something in asteroids, interplanetary dust, meteoroids, etc. Right? And this formation of planet was completed at 4.56 billion years ago. And this is the starting of geological time, the time period that we study. We consider it t not equal to 0. For geological understanding, for the study of Earth, we consider this time period as the starting of geological time. Okay, so that's why when we say that Earth is about this 4.56 billion years ago, that is how we come to know about it. Right? Is this clear? Does anyone want to ask anything? Is this clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Any doubts? Any doubts? Anything you want to ask until now from what we talked about? Here, that's nuclear synthesis. Then we moved on to origin of solar system. And lastly, we ended at formation of planets. So that is how we know that how our Earth was formed, initial stages. That is how our Earth was formed. Next, the topic that we are going to talk about is origin of Earth and how it got differentiated into. So what we see today is not how the Earth was actually formed. So what we see today is that Earth is actually in the form of layers, crust, mantle, and core, right? But how it came to that stage, that's what we're going to deal next. Okay, so let's move on to that topic known as origin of the Earth and its differentiation. Okay, let's take a 5 minutes break, and then we will start with this topic. And like if anyone wants to ask you anything during this time, you can ask. We will have a 5 minute break. If you want to drink water or anything, you can do that, and then we will continue with our lecture, the second part of our lecture, that is the origin of the Earth and its differentiation. So I hope that what we read until now was clear to everyone, and it formed the basic. Since nobody is asking any questions, I hope that you all understood whatever we whatever we learned right now, and this forms the basics of our geology syllabus. And this is just the what we can say the building blocks, the blocks that form the base, and on this base we are going to build further. So, okay, the next topic is topic of origin of Earth and its differentiation. Shall I begin? Is everyone ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. I hope everyone is ready, and so we will begin with our next topic, that is origin of Earth and its differentiation. So, differentiation, what does this term mean? That Earth was initially homogeneous, uniform, and then it got differentiated into layers. So that is what differentiation means. So these layers are actually compositionally different, as well as they are different in terms of their physical properties that we will see next. So for the formation of Earth, two hypotheses are given. The two hypotheses are, one is homogeneous model and the other is heterogeneous model. So what is homogeneous model? The homogeneous model says that we just saw that accretion was taking place, right? Condensation and accretion. These were the two processes which formed these planetesimals, right? We just saw that. So homogeneous accretion, what does that say? It says that the condensation from the nebula took place initially. First, separately condensation took place, and after condensation, accretion took place. So when condensation was happening, what was taking place, actually the refractory material was also getting condensated, and the less refractory material was also getting condensated. See in this diagram, let's say this darker portion is made up of something called Fe, Mg, these kind of higher refractory material, and this is made up of something called silicon, let's say, and oxygen, let's say. Okay, these are also getting condensated. Condensation is happening here, and these are getting accreted. Now, when these are getting accreted, what is forming is a homogeneous material. See, there is homogeneous in the sense that all kind of material are homogeneously distributed. We have got those darker, more refractory material, as well as this lighter, less refractory material. These all got accreted. So first, this accretion was complete. At this stage, let's say the accretion was complete. And then what happened was that differentiation took place. So why differentiation took place? Because those earlier formed refractory material were heavier. Iron, nickel, these were heavier. So they percolated. They percolated and resulted in the formation of core. And those which were lighter, such as the silicates, right? Silicon and silicates, these remain floated. They form the outer layers. And that is how the Earth got differentiated into something called core and primitive mantle. Now, why I'm using this word primitive? Because this is not the mantle that what we see today is not like this. It has also got differentiated because of the formation of crust. But initially, the mantle that formed was like this. So this was the homogeneous accretion model. But this was opposed. And there was another model that was given. That was the heterogeneous accretion model. Actually not opposed, but these models were given simultaneously, actually, because we cannot understand, we are yet to identify which the process took place in which manner. So these two models are actually, even there is a debate going on between these two models. So the other model that was given was heterogeneous accretion. Now, heterogeneous accretion, what does this mean? It says that the more refractory material got condensated first, and as it got condensated, it also accreted. That is, accretion and condensation are taking place simultaneously. Here what was happening, that initially it got condensated, everything got condensated, and then there was accretion. But here it is saying that accretion and condensation took place simultaneously. So more refractory material got condensed first, and then it started accreting simultaneously, and this resulted in the formation of core. And the less refractory material that was of lesser melting point, or let's say condensation point, it got condensed later, and then it got accreted. So we already formed what was, there was more different, a separate differentiation did not take place. And what we already formed initially was a differentiated earth with a core and mantle. The core consisted of more refractory material such as iron and nickel, and this consisted of lesser refractory material, that is silicon, let's say, and calcium, or other such elements or minerals that are formed from them. Understood? These are the two models that are given for the origin of the earth and the initial accretion that took place. Fine. And what happened after that? The volatiles. There were some volatiles. It's not like that all the volatiles, we talked about that volatiles were blown away, but also volatiles were being released. And these volatiles form the primitive atmosphere. But we don't need to deal with atmosphere. Our main concern is the layers of the earth, that is crust, mantle, and core. Okay. So I hope this is clear. This is understandable. That these two models were taken, these two models were hypothesized. Now, then what happened after this? Let's say the earth is finally in this phase, that we have a mantle and we have a core. Then what happened? Something is hypothesized which is known as magma ocean. That an ocean of magma. Now, as we see today, mantle is what? Mantle is, we will read about this, it is mostly solid. And some portion of it is in the form of semi-solid, we can say. And if here we also talked about that condensation took place, and then those condensed materials were actually accreted. So this must have been solid. But then a magma ocean was formed. Ocean, we can understand that when we are talking about ocean, we are talking about something which is fluid in nature, or which has some fluidity. So how did this magma ocean was formed? This magma ocean was, of course, it can be formed only because of heat, right? Because something which has condensed must be heated so that we can make it more fluid, right? Basic physics. So how did this heat come? Where did this heat come from? This heat came from three processes. What are the three processes? The first process is radioactive decay. What is radioactive decay? There are some elements, there are some isotopes of elements which are unstable, and we will read about radioactive decay later, but for now we can say that they are unstable, and then they get broken into some stable nuclei, and during this process some energy is released. That energy is converted into form of heat, and that is how radioactive decay provides heat, and it is taking place even today. This process is taking place even today. The second process is bombardment and accretion. So of course, when particles collide together, they will generate heat, right? So that was the second way in which heat was generated. And the third way in which heat was generated was gravitational compression, because of course, as we saw earlier as well, in case of nucleosynthesis and supernova, that the core, the gravitational attraction is still taking place between what has accreted. So this a compression kind of is taking place. It is getting compressed. So this compression also generates some amount of heat. So these are the three major processes through which heat was generated. And when heat was generated, what was earlier formed, this melted, and this mantle melted, and we got something in the form of a, for example, if this is core, something, a melted magmatic mantle ocean. Okay, something this kind of was generated. And this happened multiple times in the history of the earth. It was not like that it happened just once. It kept happening, because then this bombardment was, it was not like that this bombardment stopped. There were meteoroids that were coming, and then there were other things that were being bombarded on the surface of the earth. Even our moon is hypothesized. It is hypothesized that our moon was formed because of one such collision. Okay, so this magma ocean kept on forming, and it kept on forming, and then condensing, and then condensing, and then again forming. So this magma ocean was formed. From this magma ocean, something crystallized in the form of oceanic crust. Initially, an oceanic crust was formed, and in later stages, another thing condensed, that was continental crust. So it was this process of magma ocean which ultimately resulted in formation of crust, and two different types of crust, oceanic and continental. Why they were different, we will read about them, and how they are different, we will also read about this later on. But this is the process through which ultimately the earth got differentiated into its compositional layers. So see, oceanic crust was crystallized first from magma, and then the continental crust, which was formed later from partial melting of primitive mantle. What is this term partial melting? That the mantle did not, we just talked about that the mantle was solid, it did not melt completely. So a little amount of partial melting took place sometimes. So some amount of mantle melted. So this is what is known as partial melting, which we will read in igneous petrology in greater details. And that is how the continents were formed. So I hope this is clear. I hope this much is okay with everyone. And now we know how the earth came into its present state. Am I clear?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anyone wants to ask anything? Any doubts?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please.
So what is the meaning of refractive material, sir?
Yeah. It is not refractive, it is refractory. Okay. Refractory material means those which have high melting point. High melting point. So if some material is high melting point, it will also get crystallized first. For example, if there is magma, we will see this as well. But for example, there is magma and it is cooling. Fine, it is cooling. So the material that will form first would be that which has higher melting point, or let's say which has crystallization, which crystallizes early. So these are called refractory. Okay.
Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, I hope it is
Hello,
clear.
sir. Hello, sir.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Sir, these two theories, homogeneous and heterogeneous, are the formation of for what, for Earth or all planets?
See, for other planets, what we talked about, that this initial core was formed as we talked about in planetesimal model for all planets, but for different planets this took place differently. In consideration for our earth, we know that this is true. This may be true for other planets as well, but there are some differences because the Jovian planets have some differing compositions, right? We talked about that.
We are taking them for Earth only right now.
Yeah, right now what we are dealing with is the differentiation of earth.
And sir, one more thing, what is accretion, sir? I'm not.
Yeah, accretion. Okay, accretion is nothing but, you know, when they are coming together, this process,
Okay.
that
Okay.
gas got condensed first
Okay.
into grains, right? And these grains, when they come together and form this material, this core, or this, you know, the solid, this is called accretion. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so now we are done with our topic of origin and differentiation of earth. Now we know how different layers of earth came into being. Next